Thank you very much. That's really beautiful. I think it's really fleshed out and it feels very real to me in a lot of ways. And I'm impressed with how you've dealt with some very, very realistic parameters in terms of scale and zoning and lot size and those issues, and sort of worked on a very pragmatic, frame of thought. I'm very interested in this issue of the common spaces and the kind of social life that could encourage, what you're hoping to encourage. And I can always just imagine issues, if people don't want to be in the common space, they want to be left alone. I'm wondering if you could maybe flesh out a little more the kind of life that you would really imagine those inhabitants having with each other. Could this really become a community? And what is the role of the common spaces in allowing that to happen? I don't know who would want to answer, maybe Joe or Terry or...
I mean, one thing that I think is kind of interesting is that we are kind of calling these, for instance, MicroLofts, and I live in a loft building in Brooklyn, and I really know a lot of my neighbors, and we all meet in the stairwell. Do you? We do, and we...
It's very New York.
I mean, it's a large stairwell. It's an old converted factory, but it's a place where, for instance, if you have, and you tend to, I work in a building on Varick Street where I tend to meet people in the elevator. I run into people all the time. Like just now on the street, walking here, I ran into a bunch of people. We're all coming here, but it's like I think that these circulation, these public spaces, especially in New York, are places that you kind of, there's a bit of spontaneity and. Depending on the way that who's around you and where you are and maybe what kind of mood you're in, you're more likely to engage people. But I think when you live in a building that, I think people actually really want community, and people do. I mean, people have, in this case, actually, you have a lot of private space to yourself where you can be alone. But it seems like the contrast is that you can actually, if you do feel like just going to hang out for a second. In a place where you might have a spontaneous interaction, I think that these spaces are what is a space for that, and they're also places where you would be doing your laundry, or if you just need to, sit for a second where maybe you do want to look out the street window, or you want to hang out have a smoke outside on the roof terrace. It's a place where I think that kind of community really can form around these kinds of seemingly menial activities. Right,
day-to-day life.
I lived in Japan for 4 years and lived in a traditional Japanese house, and tiny, with all tatami. It was probably one of certainly the most aesthetically pleasing residential experience I ever had. It was fantastic. And as you mentioned, in Japan, people don't entertain at home, and they entertain outside in restaurants and bars. And what's really nice about having this kind of an intermediate social space is that obviously people are going to meet their friends in bars and restaurants. But to have a space where you could say, let's come on over to my place, we can sit down and I'll show you what we're doing, or we can go over some drawings or whatever. I think it's a really good idea.
Right. And the ground floor is a cafe, which is a public space, but also somehow integrated into this sort of continuum of, social and public space, right?
Well, we were trying to make this a very real possibility, and how it would actually operate would have a lot to do with where it was, who lived in the space. It would be great to actually build something like this, and we were very conscious that we were making something that could be built very easily.
Yeah, it definitely feels buildable. Yeah. Someone else?
Yeah, let me, first of all, congratulate you on producing a very admirable and provocative scheme. I think that what I would like to do is point out some of the challenges of building a scheme under the existing zoning and building codes, because I think that's part of the objective. And by the way, this idea of coming up with approaches to how you deal with urban infill housing sites of a small scale is something that's very close to me because I've been working with it with my own model that you might be familiar with. So one of the problems, one of the obvious problems is the side yard, the narrow side yard. And I was thinking about this because it's 5 feet. Now, there is a precedent for not a side yard, but a rear yard that's very small, and it was provided by Article 7B, which is for loft conversions. Mm-hmm. And there's no reason in my mind why that thinking, that logic, can't apply to what you're doing. The second real major issue is the single means of egress, which by my understanding is not allowed in a building over 4 stories high. So something, and it is a challenge. I mean, certainly you want a bunch of, runners who want to stay in shape in your building.
Well, there is an organization in New York that actually we've dealt with them. They're trying to get people to spend more time walking stairs.
Yeah, right. So. It's an AIA program.
Yeah, But we
but
got an award for creating a stairway in a school.
But as somebody who lives in a brownstone, okay, and I can tell you it becomes more and more challenging. So it really does limit the age group that can, live in this building. I mean, yes, you've provided it in the
I don't know whether
floor.
it limits it. It certainly limits them to the lower floor.
Yeah,
I mean,
to limit to the lower floor.
Which is exactly what we were trying to do. We were trying to provide, various conditions for various types.
Right. Well, let me ask you, why did you not provide an elevator?
We consciously didn't because we didn't feel that it was necessary. There are plenty of people for whom a four floor or 5 floor walk is not a problem, and then there are plenty of half the building people don't have to walk that high. So I don't understand why you would, by necessity, create an elevator for because in a 5-story building because there are plenty of people who are more than willing to walk 5 stories.
It's not 5 stories. Let's understand this because it's 5 stories that are 14.5 feet floor to floor. So it's a little different than 9 foot floor to floor.
Yeah, but I mean that's the answer.
Okay.
Although a lot of us live in lofts that have a similar height, and like Terry's loft is a similar floor to floor height because it was the loft typology. So. And that's I think you live in a 4-story walk-up, is that right?
And the elevator does 2 things. It costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of space. So the cost of the elevator is not only the elevator itself, but the space. So, I mean,
you don't have to convince me.
We're trying to push the envelope. I mean, that's what we're doing.
Look, I understand because in the smart housing model, which I developed, we don't have an elevator and we have a single means of egress, but it's limited to 4 floors. And by the way, when I was your age, yes, I could do it.
The other thing is that the rear yard, by having to accommodate the rear yard, which is a code which was very difficult to break, we could have done the same number of units in 4 floors and still had a single stair, or provided a second means of egress on the back, or put the elevator. So there is this. The point is that the codes are extremely. I guess, restrictive in certain ways when you're trying to stay within the building envelope for a specific zone, for specific zoning.
If I can, do you mind if I just continue? All right. I want to make some suggestions to you. One is I was hoping, I believe that you have to look at this as a double 25-foot lot because there are many of these size lots. Well, if you put the 2 together, not in the way that you did because you maintain the 5-foot, side yard, but if you put them together and you then get a 10-foot space between, that would make it a lot more palpable. You know.
Yeah, we had that scheme too. I think we ran out of time.
All right.
Actually, we didn't run out of time. I think we decided that this one was better because we were interested, because the problem with the scheme where the side lots come together is that then you're facing another apartment straight on. So you get an issue of privacy where you're having windows facing windows, and they're only 10 feet away. And I mean, this is another thing where we drew on some of our personal experience. I personally live in a house where the windows are about that far from the next house, and we leave our blinds closed all the time. And it's not great. We have some skylights, so that helps, but you know, we did consider that, and it's another option, but I think we purposely chose this scheme, I think, because we felt that worked better. But it is another option that's
well, let me just say, this starts getting into building materials and modeling of facades and how you have the windows oriented. And one other factor which I think is, you know, that would make it a lot would add to it, is if you use some kind of highly reflective material, if you use prismatic glass, for example, to capture light, those kinds of things, which is the next phase. And I hope you have the opportunity to develop it further, because I think it's very exciting.
I mean, that the one-way glass, I mean, I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable with that, but that sort of idea that the light's coming in, but no one can see you. It would seem a really fun project, and it would seem like multifunctional furniture could be amazing for you guys. Like I immediately looked at that bedroom and I thought, well, Resource Furniture makes this great one that it's a bed and a desk. That would be a great office up there, so that seems sort of a no-brainer. Did I miss? Is there a table anywhere, or is it sort of?
There are a number of different furniture layouts that are possible in the ground floor, and it's sort of, you get one space. So I think you're right that if you do a flexible kind of furniture arrangement where you can change things out, that's great. But another possibility is that, you know, you make a decision based on your particular living patterns. If you prefer to have a couch, maybe you do have to make the decision between couch and desk. And then, you know, you use the common space. Like if you live on the floor with a common work table, maybe you go out to that to do your work. So we sort of thought that it could be customizable based on people's particular desires. But absolutely, the kind of built-in unit has many more options in terms of having all together in one space. If you have that kind of furniture.
I mean, that's why I think, like, I don't know, it's just a very helpful thing. Like, it's the space, but you want to be thinking about that furniture. And this is the part of your guys' idea was plug-in, right? This is sort of plug-in stuff. And if we can, it's too expensive now, in my opinion. There's some beautiful stuff. It's a little expensive, but once we get the volume going and people start pushing on it, we should be in good form.
I think the way we'd looked at these spaces would be that the turnover would be, I mean, I think because we're thinking of the world that we live in, which is young professionals. And the turnover is quite quick, and people, you talked about things, investing in a really nice table and then worrying about taking it somewhere else often isn't the issue. I think that probably a lot of this would just be done ad hoc, pieces of plywood from the lumberyard kind of tacked together. I think that's the way, if this were to be built and if it were to really serve its function, I think in fact that's probably the way it would be done. I mean, believe me, I can understand a really elegant way of having it done where everything moves, and I know those Japanese houses.
Right, yeah.
I also know that they're extremely expensive because all of that gear is expensive. But furniture is definitely something that has to change. The whole idea of making furniture in this country has to change, and it is.
Yeah. Looks like we have to.
We have to move on. Sorry.
Up. Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
One thing. Great quote. I think it's a Toronto architect, but I think it's relevant to all this stuff, and that is that small fridges make for great cities.